Just remember, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
In the culture war, there are no winners, just podcasters. Only a few are willing to risk their lives in the face of some of the dumbest ideas to have ever captured human civilization. Every week, I, Meghandaum, and my partner, Sarahhaider, humbly accept this mission in order to bring you conversations that are equal parts stunning, brave, and unhinged. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, Megan.
We have a very special. This is like going to be stunning and brave, next level, stunning and brave.
Yeah, we're every time we just up the ante, and this time it's going to be extraordinary. So we have Aella, and in my head I've been saying it Aella the whole time. Yeah. So now I'm gonna.
Yeah, most people do, or like I think 64% last time I polled.
Oh,
yeah. So you're not.
I changed the pronunciation of my last name like halfway, like a few years ago, and I mean, it's a long story that we won't go into now, but it was a huge disaster, and I should never have messed with it.
Well, were you trying to like match the way people were already?
No, I was trying to be loyal to my parents. We grew up pronouncing it one way, and then I realized my parents had been mispronouncing it, and so I went back to the other way. And then when I started a podcast, my parents were dead. I felt bad saying my last name the in a different way than they had said it because I was speaking it out loud all the time. And so then I went back to saying it their way. But for 20 years, people had thought it was Dom. I went back to saying Daum, and people thought it was Dom. Anyway, I should have just made up a stage name like when I was 20, like you. So yeah, well done.
That's the way to go.
It is.
Yeah. What made you choose this name, actually?
Was
there something about it? Is it from something?
I'm so lucky. I had no idea. I was just picking a internet screen name, and I just picked a list. Like there's a list of Greek mythological characters, like the obscure ones, off of a Wikipedia page, and I was like an alphabetical list. I didn't get very far.
It's good to be an A and an E.
Yeah. It was like basic. It was like not super taken in namespace. It was like easy to remember. It was like clearly feminine. It sounded like it hit all of like the markers for a good like internet name. And I just used it was for being a cam girl. And then it just spiraled out of control, and now it's everything. So
that's good. Cool.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I should have gone with the stage name too. I just all kinds of regrets here.
Yeah, I know. So, well, a lot of our audience does know who you are, but I think some don't. So we thought maybe we would just start in the beginning. We won't make you like go through your whole life story in granular detail, but I don't know. Maybe you could start off. How do people get into the cam girl thing? Like, do you think it's too late for Sarah and me? Because if this doesn't work out, we might have to.
You have to just make an account, upload your ID to verify that you're over age, and then you click live stream.
That's not a worry. We're definitely we're definitely of age.
Yeah, I think you could probably do. Maybe you could even host a podcast on a live streaming site. That might be interesting.
Oh, but do we have to like do something? Do we have to strip? Do we have to? Oh, okay.
You do whatever you want.
Okay.
It's just like you broadcast, and then people can tip you live through it.
Oh. I like that.
I like that too.
Based on if like we say something witty or intelligent.
Oh,
like,
is there a
metric? Does it go up?
Well, these are primarily men, so they don't care quite that much about being witty.
Our men are super nerdy and smart, though.
Oh, then you might have a shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we know that you grew up in a very religious background. You went to you were homeschooled, and I actually have a lot of questions about the effect that had on you and how that kind of shaped your psyche. But before we get into that, like, tell us how you went from a super Christian homeschooling household to cam girl hyper success.
Yeah, I think the Christian thing like maybe backfired slightly, or I did some sort of like
you think
thing. Yeah. I mean, there was some sort of like taking things seriously, like, oh, if you're going to be Christian, you have to be really Christian. Like, you don't want to be just culturally, you have to take it seriously. Like, we're not going to just casually hold beliefs. We're going to make sure we understand. And then I was like, okay. And then anyway, after I got out into the world and I realized that like none of the rules applied here, like everything was different. This was a completely culturally different space. And then I just didn't know which rules I should take versus leave. Like they were like, oh, don't have a ton of promiscuous sex, which is a thing that normal culture has. But my parents also had like, don't hold hands before marriage, right? Which is not something. And so it was like kind of hard for me to distinguish like which were the rules that like culture held versus didn't hold. So I just sort of threw them all out. I was like, okay, everything's a blank slate. I'm going to start from total scratch. And what is scratch is I would like to have sex with people, probably. So I just went and just would go ask people to have sex with them. I'd like walk up to them and be like, would you like to bang me?
No.
And then
okay, but
really?
wait, at what stage? This was before you started doing the cam stuff? Like when was this? Like,
this
when
was
you how
old after leaving home and losing my faith, but like before starting the camp. So I've already like shifted into some sort of like really extreme state where I was just like, if you want sex, go get sex. Like that was literally all of it. I was like, I feel like I'm aroused. Let's go find somebody to put their penis in.
So you weren't, okay, so you were not like interested in having a boyfriend. So, but arousal meant like actually going and finding someone to have sex with. You were not like, were you like self-pleasuring? Like what was it like there's sex meant going and finding somebody to do that with? End of story.
Yeah, I mean, it was a variety of things, like also masturbation. I did have boyfriends, but at that point I was poly. So, and then, but like sometimes I had boyfriends, sometimes I didn't, but there was like just a lot of time where I was like living alone and I'm like, well.
And what year was this?
Well, how old were you? Like, yeah, I think that's a relevant
20,
metric.
21, 22.
But I think the year is relevant because like the poly thing would have been very much in the air. I'm just trying to think like how prevalent in the culture that was.
Oh, culturally, wait, how old was I? This is like 10 years ago. I became poly as soon as I heard what it was. I was like 19 and I was still like 1 foot into the conservative world. And then I heard some people be like, oh yeah, we're poly. And I was like, that's it. That's me. And just like from then on, I've never doubted it. I was just like clearly like, that is clearly what I am. So.
But what did that mean to you? Was it just like the alternative to being like in a committed relationship, like boring marriage?
No, it's just not polyamory doesn't mean you're not committed. It just means that you don't restrict your partner from intimacy with others. So to me, it was just like, because before I had started out with like a monogamous boyfriend, because that's just, I didn't think that you could do anything else. I wasn't in my awareness. This was a monogamous boyfriend. And I was and then at some point in that relationship, I wanted to have sex with somebody else. And it just didn't make sense to me why I couldn't. I was like, this has nothing to do with you. This doesn't affect my relationship with you. I love you equally, regardless if I have sex with this other person. Like, it just didn't make, and then after that, I just couldn't go back to that. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Because I feel like when I hear your life story and kind of how you think about things, you know, or at least what I see of you thinking about things on Twitter, I feel a great deal of resonance. You know, I feel like there's like so many ways in which I feel like I walked that path myself, but in so many ways also I'm like the mirror image of you. I kind of went like this trad route again. You
weren't going up to people and asking them to have sex with you? Sarah,
I don't think I ever did that. I don't think I ever did that. No one ever did that to me either, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. No one's ever just walked up to me and asked for sex.
Well, yeah.
Does that mean there's something wrong with me? Like they're just...
Did you get catcalled?
Have I gotten catcalled? Yeah. I mean, not really.
So that's
the thing is, but I don't really, like, I'm not like walking around in a city, you know, I live in suburban like neighborhoods, like nobody who's catcalling around here.
Well, but you did. You have lived in cities. Okay, so
you
were
lived in cities.
Right. So Aella, you were going up to guys and saying, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Like as if asking them, like, "Do you have a?"
Usually someone I had talked to a little bit, or maybe an acquaintance.
Okay.
But usually it felt a little out of the blue for them, I think. Yeah.
And how did it go? Like the first time you did that, what was the situation?
I don't remember. I think I don't remember that much. It was just 10 years ago. So I remember which one was the first time. I just would go have casual sex and be like, all right, cool. I mean, eventually it took me a while to realize I didn't actually enjoy it that much. And I mostly stopped, to be clear. So like maybe you're more advanced than me, Sarah. I don't know.
Yeah. skipped that step and realized I just wasn't going to be into it. I think I was just way more disgusted by strangers, like, and I still am. And it takes me a while to get over that disgust. And that might be part of it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Maybe the vast majority of women, I would suspect.
But it's interesting, like, it sounds like you didn't have a sort of, or your blueprint for sex and relationships, it wasn't even negative, it was non-existent, like, from what I understand. And I know you've talked about, is it Grow with God? Was that the program that your parents subscribed to?
I'm impressed. I'm really impressed.
Well, I've tried to do some research. I think this is interesting. Well, also because I think Sarah should implement this parenting method because I think it would help for our scheduling purposes. So basically, if the baby cries, you don't pick it up because you don't want the baby to be needy. You want it to be self-sufficient. Am I
and this is a religious
accurately?
This is a religious doctrine? How did that get... that feels to me that it's very modern. Like, I feel like in the 60s and so... Like around... There was a time in which that became popular, but it wasn't always the case. No, it's not like super old traditional doctrine. I mean, it couldn't have been.
How... Like, a lot of varieties of, like, religious stuff are not super old. Like, we were Calvinists, and that's not, like, that old, you know? But... The baby thing, it came out of, you know, the should be headship over the child. You know, there's a strict order of hierarchy and you're supposed to enforce that. And so you should, at every point, anytime a child is trying to exert their will over yours, demonstrate that, like, no, my will comes first. And so if the baby's like crying and trying to get your attention, or like they're trying to like demonstrate upset over something, like, you're not supposed to like behave in a way that like lets the child think that they have power.
Sarah, you got to get on that.
No, it's too late.
You don't know how often
I'm
we
at
have
the
to like
bottom of
reschedule stuff because her kids are like, I want you to do something. I want to be picked up. I want to be fed.
It's changed all kinds of demands. No, I'm at the bottom of the power hierarchy, I think, in our household. Is that the case of like many moms though? Like, you're at the very bottom. You're the one.
Yeah, it's always the mom. But this is kind of like, don't take this the wrong way, but this is like how you train a dog. It's very similar. Like,
yeah, we were explicitly, my parents would often be like, oh yes, like, it's like training dogs.
Yeah, they're the head of the pack. And so the logic with dogs is the dog is actually very soothed. It's more relaxing for the dog not to be in charge. Like, to be the alpha is stressful. So, I mean, so how did that work? I mean, because the obvious pop psychology like response to what you're describing would be like, oh, you were denied any kind of physical affection. That must have been terrible. And so therefore, like, it's sort of, it's played out on this sexual landscape later. I mean, that's a very reductive interpretation, but like, do you have any diagnosis or like thoughts as to why your brain is wired the way it is?
My guess is it's mostly genetics. I think that there's like a strong temptation to like put on narratives into your past. Like, oh, I was raised this way. I'm like have these kinks or these psychological hangups. And like, it might be true, but you know, generally your siblings were raised also in identical ways and they have very different psychological hangups than you. And so I'm like, to what degree is it you're just the way that your brain works versus what you actually went through? And I think it's just so tempting to look at the narratives and be like, that matches. Because it's really easy to notice the things that match and not notice the things that don't. Although I do suspect I have like some of my kind of like fuck you authority comes from that. Because the upbringing was like quite harsh, you know, a lot of like suppression of the things that you want, even if it doesn't matter, it's just because you want them, like in order to demonstrate power. So now I'm like, fuck it. I just can't handle like any sort of pressure, like force to get me to do things. I'm like, nope, I'm going to do things only when I want to. I can't like have a lot of trouble working for other people. Like anytime I've been in a collaboration with a project or like working with a boss or in any, it's just, I explode horribly. It's bad.
Do you have siblings?
2 younger. Yeah.
And what do they do? Do they have more like traditional lives and work?
One is
situations?
very charismatic. And so she is gallivanting around Europe, being charismatic at people. And then they're giving her things. The other is a stripper.
Okay. Wow. So how do your parents feel about this?
Take it? Yeah. How did they? How
are they all over Facebook being
yeah.
like, "Hey," like posting graduation photos smugly, like all the other parents these days?
No, a lot of parents their parents less conservative than mine that did more shunning of their kids for like other people in the sex work world. It was not that uncommon to like be hanging out with the sex worker. Like, oh yeah, my parents don't talk to me anymore. I'm like, yeah, you know, that's just the way it works. But I think it helped a little bit that like when I left home, I kind of like fucking lost it. I like left at 17 and I was just like, I'm not talking to you, my dad, anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to go like have sex with a bunch of random people, you know, a lot of crazy shit. And so I think that made my parents feel like, oh, if we behave wrong, we're going to lose our kids a little bit. I still don't talk to my dad, but I think they chilled out a lot with my sisters and I do have like very like nice, polite relationships with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that I think you're right in terms of the genetics have much to do with it, or even all to do. It actually irritates me quite a bit because like I have a story, a unique like background. People try to read a lot of my, current like political inclinations or even just how I choose to live my life, how I choose to socialize with people, as a as a consequence of my of like the like you're now kind of this trad-ish person because this is how you were raised and this is what's comfortable for you and I'm like, I don't think it has anything it is how I'm comfortable, but I don't think it has anything to do with how I was raised, really. I think that's just something that happened to me,
It's like the Just So story. Like if you could be anything and then you could use the same story to explain it, like of course you're very trad, you were raised trad, or like of course you're not trad, you were raised trad. Like if you can like insert any sort of result into the end, then the argument itself is bad. Right.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot with like even people who talk about like alcoholism. They'll say, I'm not an alcoholic because I saw that my father was, I'm like, maybe that's why. Maybe that affected you a lot, and now you chose to make different decisions or not touch alcohol at all, or maybe you're just a different person, Like,
but that person probably is an alcoholic. They just don't drink. If they were an alcoholic, if they were drinking, they would drink alcoholically. So
yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just think that so much of what we are is, I mean, it's not like to say that we're necessarily going to be one way or another due to our genetics. It's that we have to recognize that we come from a pool, and a lot of what the kind of predispositions that we end up exploring have to do with our parents and who the kind of people they were and the genetic code they gave us. It's just a very to the extent that I feel out of step with, I guess, online trad culture in a lot of ways, actually. But one of the things I notice about them is that they're very into child rearing, like in a very particular way. Like raise your children to be like this and have them believe this, and then they will be, and then they won't go through rebellion, and when they're teenagers, and they'll have good relationships with you or whatever. And I just feel like I think the way that we raise our children probably has less to do with their outcomes than we imagine, like a lot less to do with their outcomes. Mm-hmm. And I think what you instead should be maximizing is, happiness and spending time and enjoying each other's company, like in the present day, rather than trying to socially engineer a kind of outcome, like socially engineer a person. So yeah, that's my spiel there. But your persona now, like online, is very interesting to me. So let's just go back through your story a little bit. Yeah. You were raised in this really Christian environment. Was this a specific? You said Calvinist. I don't. Yeah. So I don't 100% understand what that means.
We believed in predestination. Is the primary thing. So we believe that not by works of righteousness which you've done, but according to His mercy, He saved us. Where like you are saved by God's. He just chose you for some reason, and this results in your salvation, because if you chose to believe, that would be considered a work, and thus you could be prideful about it.
Okay. Did your parents, were they brought up this way, or did they convert into this?
Both of my parents were new converts.
Yeah.
Okay. Or like by new as in like my grandparents, none of my grandparents were religious.
Right. Okay. So did they meet like in a world of converts? They met in the context of this religion, or did they join it together? Did they get into it together?
I think they met right around, I think they both converted around like teenage years-ish. And they met also, I don't think they met in the religion, but they were in the same circles or something. And then,
wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. It's because it does sound a lot like the zealotry of the converted, you know.
The new
so you got so you went from you did the camming, and then you became sex worker. You worked in escort. I don't know if you're still doing that, and of course now you're a pollster, which is Sarah's parallel. Sarah's shadow self is a pollster. She loves polls, and
I do.
Why is it only shadow?
If she could do her life over again, she would be a pollster. She would be Kellyanne Conway, basically.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
So we want to know how you got into, you know, what the sex work was like, if that's still going on, and how that kind of parlayed into polls, because it's from the poll. And I know you want a stripper from the stripper poll to the online poll.
Oh my gosh, this is where
they didn't call me. I'm not an old magazine writer for nothing.
All right.
Okay. All right.
I should probably actually do some stripping just so that I can make that pun.
Right here, feel free, because we need clicks. We need the
tips.
I mean, we're a new show.
I need the poll though to be able to make the pun.
We can probably like CGI that in later. They can do anything in post.
Oh, I do. I forgot. I used to have a mime poll routine where I would mime like a stripper pole and then.
Oh yeah.
It's very hard to swing around that.
Yeah, because you did miming. You were a mime, a stripper mime.
Yeah.
Which is like, a mime is the scariest thing. I mean, is there anything scarier than a clown or a mime? And sort of like an erotic layer on top of that must be like pretty intense for some people.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that to people.
Yeah. So okay, well, I mean, a lot of what you talk about from the sex work is what men really want and what they would come to you for, and there's a discrepancy between like just wanting to get off and wanting emotional connection or just like skin to skin contact. I mean, you've talked a lot about that, but I mean, maybe we could start by talking about like, what do you think people don't understand about male sexuality? Let's just say.
Wait, I still have a ping for the last question, which was like the transition from sex to polls.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. That one, or should I answer the?
Oh, you're so good. You're keeping track of the order that we're asking the questions. Yes. How did you get from one to the next? So people can know out there.
Okay. I don't mind either. I just didn't want to like accidentally imply that I was like ignoring a question. So I have to explicitly
Sarah ignores my questions all the time.
Yeah, that's my job.
No, I don't know. My question is like, why is everybody not doing polls? Like the question is like less like, why am I doing them? And like, why am I the only one doing them? Like to me, clearly the thing to do if you have a following online is to do polls. Like that's just in the same way that like, if you see a beautiful mountain, you go hike it. Or if you like are with a friend, you like make a joke. If you have any following, you do polls. This is just a thing. And I'm just in constant confusion why no one else is. So that feels to me like more. Anyway, I started developing a following online from horny men, and then I was like, haha, I can ask horny men questions, and I did, and it was very exciting. I was like, oh, I should ask them another question, and then it slowly exploded over the course of years. I think I have a spreadsheet. I think I've like 4,000 polls since 2017.
So what was the first question you asked in the poll? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I think it was something dumb like, should I do more Twitter polls or something like that?
But were you doing the polls so you could figure out what would work in terms of like monetizing your work? Like, was this kind of like metrics for?
Yeah. How have they applied to your work, or was it only ever just satiating a kind of curiosity and that was it? Or has there
100% satiating curiosity. There's like a couple small applications. Like the thing is, if you ask people what do you want to see, people are terrible at knowing. People are just not creative. They just never. So I would occasionally try polls for that. Like, which one would you rather? But it's just very low value. It's a little bit better when you're asking other girls, like if you do a survey. But then we get out of poll land. We get into survey land where you're being a little more careful, and you ask other girls like, how much money are you making, what are the habits you have, what do you look like, so you can see what correlates with high income. And that stuff is like useful for me making higher income, but besides that, polls are not like a business strategy for me. They're just purely like an obsession.
Oh, okay.
I get it. Right. I get that. I do polls sometimes. And I'm also kind of like, why don't other people take advantage of the fact that you have an audience? You can just ask them the question. I don't know if I learned too much. I think it's kind of like tea leaves, where it's like, it might help you, see a path that you didn't see before. Maybe somebody brings up a point that you didn't think about in the replies. Sometimes those are like more interesting actually than whatever the results of the polls actually are. Or they'll comment on how I phrased it and say that that's problematic for some reason. Yeah. And that helps me learn something. And even just asking questions. And, sometimes people get irritated from like, why did you ask this on Twitter when you could have just Googled it? And it's like, but on Twitter, there's just this serendipity aspect of it. Like there could be somebody there that's reading your question who just has like a very particular kind of knowledge about it. And they link something really amazing to you that you wouldn't have found if you had Googled in the first like 10 pages, or maybe not at all. So there's something incredible about just being able to reach out to a lot of people and then ask them something. Meghan, you don't do polls? You don't do Twitter
No, because polls? I feel like I don't have a big enough following, and then the problem with doing it's okay, but like the problem with doing them is then I feel like it shows how few people responded to the poll. Like if only 100 people respond, and I'm like, oh, I look like such a loser. But I also don't have any patience. I often just make the polls last like a day or something. What's a good length of time? Like what's the sweet spot for window of time?
I mean, ideally infinite, but it depends on if you want like a final thing. If you want to like have like the final thing so you can screenshot and share it, I usually do 3 days.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked him for stupid things like what should I name my show, or like what should I do? Like I've asked like sort of extremely specialized questions. It should probably be broader.
I feel like one of my favorite aspects is like tiny bits of the human experience. Like, can you make your ears roar?
Oh, yes, I can.
Yeah.
What?
Like a lot of people can't.
What do you mean? What do
you mean?
If
you use this muscle, and is that what you're talking about, right? If you like do something, you can make your ears have like a roaring, like distortion sound.
I'm doing it right now.
I'm trying to do this. What muscle? Jaw muscle? Is it a muscle in my... It's a muscle in my neck.
Kind of.
It's like it feels like it's like right like here almost, like something, but it's like really inside. It's not.
It's like if you were gonna like clench, like bear down in yours on the side of your ears.
And if I do this correctly, my ears roar.
It's a little
like a rumble, like a brief like.
Yeah.
It's almost like going into the ocean. You know that sound when like a camera goes in the water and it's like. It's a little bit like that, and briefly.
So is this one of these things like if you can do it, you're a lesbian or something? Like this is we had this on a guest on, and she wanted, they had the index finger test, which is apparently bogus. I can't believe all this. I've lived all these years thinking that was like, a slam dunk.
I've lived all these months.
Yes,
actually.
exactly.
Yeah.
So is it one of these things like if you can make your ears roar, you are like a good driver, or you have better some kind of like you have better like space relations or something?
A good driver. I don't know. Maybe you can like hear underwater or something.
I'm still trying. I'm trying to now. I'm going to be just like stretching out my jaw for the rest of the.
It's like if you yawn. When you yawn really hard, and then your ears kind of.
I hear a little click, but I don't.
It's not a click.
It's not like my jaw.
You don't even get it when you yawn.
No. Like I hear something that sounds like my jaw, but it's not a roar. It's not even it's not that noticeable of a noise.
There's probably a YouTube video on how to do it. So you can check that out.
Can everyone do it?
No,
or
I forget
obviously not.
You can do a poll to find out how weird it is that you can't do it.
Have you done this poll?
Great. I have. I just forget the results.
So what is it? I bet it's like
I want to say it's like 20% of people can't do it.
Cannot do it.
I want to say.
I feel like they probably just don't understand the question, though. I feel like,
what the thing is, it's obvious. If you can, you're like, oh, yeah, that thing.
Right. I never.
It's like, wait, because you're never trying to do it. You're just yawning, and then it happens. Is that what's happening? It's like a mechanical thing.
It's not necessarily a yawning thing. I mean, it's.
Then what is it? How does it happen to you? How did you learn you can do this?
I don't. It's just.
It's one of those things like when you're a little kid And you're like thinking about like, oh, what is that sensation? Like, I remember when I like was little and I thought I could see, like, you know how you can see dust particles if you like let your eyes glaze over a certain way?
Yeah.
I used to think that I could see molecules. I was like, oh, I can see molecules because I see these teeny, teeny little things and they're floating.
They do kind of look like molecules.
They do. So like you learn what a molecule is. And then if you let your eyes kind of like rest or space out, you can see them. So it's one of those things.
So it's just like maybe an experience you just didn't have because you didn't have it. And
I don't know.
You just didn't think about it. And maybe it's like something mechanically all of us can do or learn how to do. It's not like, so I did a local poll. And by that, I mean like my family, like last time we were hanging out. I asked them about the can you picture, can you see things when you, what is it? Aphantasia.
Yeah.
When I say, close your eyes and think about an apple, what do you see? Can you see an apple? Do you see in your mind's eye an apple? And I struggle. Something kind of pops up.
Some people don't do that? Really?
I never heard of this. We found that some people can see like movies in their mind's eye if they want. And they're as good as if you were watching a movie. And then others can't picture anything. It's just blank.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you done a poll about how many people can wink? Have you done a winking poll?
I don't think so.
Because I cannot wink.
Really?
And it's really a bummer. Yeah, I can't.
You would be good at winking. I think
I would be if I could wink. I would wink. I would overwink.
You would wink all the time. You'd be winking.
I'm always kind of feel
on
like
this podcast.
Yes, I kind of feel like I need to tell people like, yeah, I see you, I get you, I know what you're up to.
I feel like winking is something people do, like older people do, and like younger people never. I don't know any like young people who wink for any reason.
Sarah is so ageist.
Going on winking. Do you feel? Aella, back me up. Do you feel like people are winking at you, or like your age or younger?
Like it's a grandma thing? Is that what you're saying?
It's an old dude.
I did recently have a cute boy wink at me, and that was really nice.
Oh, okay.
I was like, totally unexpected. Because I'm like, did you just fucking wink? And
did you wink? People still do this? It's like being called, being called a bird or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so are you still doing sex work, or is that in the past?
I'm doing OnlyFans now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I think people have been really interested in what you have to say about this, because like I just said, you have insights into men, and I'm assuming most of your clients are men. I think that's mostly what you've talked about. So again, like, what are we getting wrong about men? I mean, because we're in a moment where we're being really hard on them. It's like, if you're a white man, you are fair game for just being a punching bag, and it's a political act if you just say something horrible to a man. So what do you have to say about that?
I mean, it depends on the demographic of man you're talking about. But I mean, I think we hold men clearly to an unfair standard. Like, as one tiny example, short men versus like overweight women are like kind of similar in the dating marketplace, and one of them gets significantly different treatment than the other. Or like small dicks, right? Like it's considered fair game to body shame in this way. Anyway, I'm saying the double standards for like what constitutes like social dunking on like a man's identity and things that he values, the ways that he's valuable to a woman specifically. Like, we do have no sort of immunity to this at all, and know that we've built it up around like this happening to women. And I think this is quite unfair, and it sort of manifests a bit in the way that I see people in sex work. Although, again, it depends on the demographic. Like, the kinds of men that I saw when I was escorting, very different from the kinds of men who join OnlyFans. And I think they join it for different reasons and get different needs fulfilled. So, again, it depends. Like, the in-person clients were, like, much more old. They were older. They tended to be more married, tended to be more established, and, like, a lot nicer or smarter or something. I don't know. I like them more. And then people online tend to be a lot younger and tend to be more of like the porn watching demographic. Very sweet still, but like there's a little bit more dehumanization that goes on, I think.
Oh, so the older guys. Okay, so these are guys that would have like come of age after online, after online porn. So right,
yeah.
Okay, and they're just less likely. They're just less online, so they're going to come to you as a traditional client.
Well, I mean, it depends. I'm not sure that actually predicts it strongly, because like there's different kinds of guys for whom, like, maybe it feels gross to you to pay a girl for sex in real life in a way that it doesn't feel gross to pay for their porn. Like, one of them makes you kind of like a cuck and loser, and the other one is just like everybody pays for porn. So a lot of it like depends on that sort of thing, or like to what degree do you value an actual in-person interaction versus like how much are you satisfied, or how much are you afraid of the police, or like how much are you afraid of STDs? Like all of these are like the primary things I think that go into determining whether or not somebody sees a girl online or in person. And like I would say age is a smaller subset of that. Although you have ones that are associated with age. Like, for example, like if you're a married man, I think you're more likely to see an escort. Because like you just don't have sex options, whereas like an in-person guy might be able to get sex options still. Or sorry, a single guy.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And so do most of the married men say they're in sexless marriages? Is that mostly it, or they're just not getting the sex that they want? They're not attracted to their wives or something?
I would say majority say that their wife doesn't want to have sex with them. There are some exceptions. There's a minority that's like, I'm not attracted to my wife. Another minority is like, my wife and I have an absolutely fantastic relationship, great sex, I love her dearly. I just want novelty. That's pretty rare, but I have seen people say that a few times. But the majority of the time, it's like a guy in a relationship, 20, 30 years. His wife stopped having sex with him, usually around the time kids came along. And he's like been trying to put up with it, but he's like really sexually unhappy. And I was like, fine, I'll go see an escort then. Because he doesn't want to fuck up his normal life. He doesn't want to have an affair with someone at work where it could blow up and she's trying to get like a relationship with him. He wants something compartmentalized where it's safe and separate from his family.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And how's this? And so the OnlyFans guys are, you said, young and online. Like, so why are they doing OnlyFans rather than just watching porn?
The personal connection. It's a vast market here. Like, guys want a girl that they have some sort of like influence over. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like in the same way that it's fun to be friends with someone because you have influence over them. You can make them laugh. You can tell them a story and they get sad, right? Like, I mean influence in the kind of way where you're connected to someone. Yeah. Where like the thing that you do has an effect and vice versa. And I think this is like a really important part of what a lot of men want sexually. It makes it way more satisfying for them. So OnlyFans is great because you get to talk to the girl, you know, find out what she likes, ask her for things.
Yeah.
It's like, what do they want to talk to you about?
Just a bunch, usually their lives. Usually they want to tell you about their lives. Yeah.
And you're listening along and you're like, I'm interested and this is interesting to me.
Universal for OnlyFans people and escorts. It's one of the most stable things. Is that like the one you talk to a guy, he wants to, I actually have a spreadsheet where I recorded the amount that a man talked versus the amount that I listened.
Oh, wow. See,
pull it up. Sorry.
This is the kind of thing they'll love in the feminist blogosphere. So this is like an actual mansplaining spreadsheet.
Well,
but with that minus the agenda. No, I know what you're saying. It's they need to talk.
Well, it's also partially that like I'm actively trying to get them to talk. Like,
no,
if they're
I
on
know.
A date,
I know. It's like a therapist.
Yeah,
it's like going to therapy, which Sarah is against. Sarah's against psychotherapy. Are you more against like seeing an escort or more against seeing a therapist, Sarah?
Like for me or like
no, for
my
the
husband
world.
or for the world?
For the world.
For the world, I think it's better to see an escort. As to how I'd feel about it if it was like my husband, I don't know. I don't know what makes me, one makes me more angry and another turns me off more. But for myself, I think I'd rather see an escort. Yeah, there you go. That's the magic of it. And you know, we're gonna
not even go into it. A therapist could do more damage, according to you. Yeah,
I think a therapist is just I don't know what it is. I mean, this is. I don't want to rehash that conversation. We just had one.
It was a very lengthy
where
conversation.
I went and I became more unhinged than normal.
But people agreed with her, so it wasn't totally off the wall.
Some did.
So,
there you go.
So do they come? Okay, but is it like a therapy session? Do they come to like a certain place? Do you have like a room that you use, or like they come and then like is there? You have like small talk and you talk first. Like how does it usually go? And like how long are the sessions? What's the sort of like logistics of this?
On average, people book around 1.5 to 2 hours with me. And then usually it depends on the amount of time. a lot. If it's a longer session, then usually you could sort of meet for food or drinks beforehand, like at the hotel lobby or nearby restaurant, and you get to know each other a little bit. And it sort of simulates a first date. Those are my favorite. I like those the most, where it's like you could have like met this guy at a bar off Tinder, and now you're like meeting up to see if you like each other.
And does he tell you like what to wear, or do you just wear whatever you want? How do you dress? I wear whatever I want.
When I first started, I was like, oh, maybe you can make clothing requests. But like at this point, or like later in the trajectory, I just want to see guys who like the thing that I am already, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guys that made clothing requests were much like, they tended to be less fun sexually. Like I kind of felt like a piece of meat a little bit. Most of the guys weren't like that. I would say like 80% of the guys probably were like great people who like really cared. But there's a subset you could tell, I'm like, oh, they're just doing this because I'm an interchangeable body. Like it doesn't even matter what I say or who I am. They just like they wanted to like dress me up like a doll and fuck that. And I enjoyed those way less. It was like still fine, like whatever, I'll take it, but it was not very fun.
So
anyway,
you meet them, okay.
The thing,
yeah.
Where they
you meet, okay, so you meet them like for drinks as if it's a real date or something often.
Yeah. And occasionally it's shorter, and then in which case you meet like in the hotel room. And then you like sit on the hotel bed or chairs and you chat for a little bit before, you know, one of you makes a move and you bang.
So you don't always make the move? Sometimes like what if it's awkward? Like who breaks the ice? Like who then who makes the move? Like what happens?
I usually make the first move because a lot of the time the guys are nervous a bit or like they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They don't want to offend me, which is reasonable, although I'm difficult to offend. So usually like we'll be talking and then I'm usually tracking the time. So you usually want about like a third. If it's an hour, you want like a third of the way in to start the sex, and then you have sex for like a little bit more than 1/3, and then the last bit is cleaning up and saying goodbye. And then the ratios change a little bit. I used to have like a music playlist that I would play, and it was perfectly timed for the amount of time. I had like a 2.5 hour.
What was on the list? Is that like a Spotify list that you released? That would be.
I could.
An hour. How to get in and out of a sexual encounter in an hour. I think a lot of women would appreciate that. Like 20 minutes. I think that would be like it's coming. Like you're prepared.
I knew all the songs. I knew the order, so I knew how far we were. So I didn't have to check the clock.
Oh my God, you're like a jazzercise teacher. You're like a bar method teacher. They curate their playlists for all the different exercises. Okay. So, and did anybody ever scare you? Like, did you ever get or afraid someone was going to be violent with you, or has that ever happened?
Yeah, only once. And it was ironically a guy who got through screening somehow. Like normally you screen your clients. So everybody they go through a process where I check, you get references. And when I was working with an assistant to do this, I just paid her. And there was some miscommunication. I forget exactly what happened, but like she thought that I had screened him and I thought that she had screened him, and we just fell through. And then so I saw him, and if we had checked, after I saw him, I checked the screening info. I'm like, oh, okay. If I had seen the info, I would not have actually accepted this client. But yeah, no, it was not great. We started at a bar in the hotel. I think it was like an hour and a half. And we started for drinks, and he sort of like pressured me to drink more, which is like, again, my fault for not putting up boundaries and saying no. But I was like, whatever. Okay, I guess I'll have a second. Like he ordered a drink, and then he's like, you want some of it? I don't know. And I kept being like, nah, but he was like, oh, come on, it'll be fun or whatever. It's like, fine. Again, kind of my fault. I should have said no. And then he waited much longer. I kept saying, okay, we should probably go upstairs. I don't know if you want this thing in the whole detail.
Yes.
It was just a series of small boundary pushes where I'm like, it was starting to get to the time where like we should go upstairs now if we want to have like a normal amount of sex. And so I kept like gesturing like, should we go? And he just kept like staying down and being like, no, I'll get another drink or something, until it's gonna get quite close to our ending time. I'm like, this is gonna be really fast. And so we go upstairs finally. I think it was like 20 minutes left or something. And then I went to the bathroom, and he put the money directly into my purse, which is a big no-no. You're not supposed to open up someone's purse and like do that, especially not with escorting. And there's like a whole thing. You're supposed to leave it on.
How do they know this? Is there like a code of ethics somewhere that is in the public domain? How does somebody know this?
It's usually say it on the website. Like if you're booking with the girl, she'll have a code of etiquette.
Okay.
Most of them are the same.
Okay.
We all share mostly the same code of etiquette with some deviances, but like it's very standard. Almost all escorts will tell you, leave the donation on the counter in a clearly visible place, and then excuse yourself to the bathroom.
The donation.
Yes.
That's how it's referred to.
For your time.
Oh.
Yes. So anyway, that's another thing. And then we started having sex, and then he just got really violent during sex, started like choking me, like slapping me really hard, like biting me like really hard, and then saying really aggressive, mean things to me. like as he was showing me, like you like a horror. Anyway, it was really scary, and I was like kind of drunk at this point, and so my cameras. And then I remember thinking like I'm afraid this guy might in fact kill me because he's like escalating and like causing me quite a bit of pain. And I was like thinking like if I scream, will people hear me? Like how do I get out of this? Like it was like weirdly calm. I was actually mostly chilled. It felt like a very calculated like am I gonna die? But I did not die. I was very careful to like act like I liked it because I was afraid if I started resisting or struggling that he would get more violent. Which again is a controversial opinion. I like tweeted a question like in this hypothetical scenario, should she have resisted or not?
But that's such a common reaction. That's a self-preservation method. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's not that's not something that men understand intuitively. Even when you explain it to them, you'll be like, but they'll say, but then how would I have known that this was not okay? Unless you resist in some way or you say no.
Did you say no? Sometimes they think saying no is part of the game, though.
Yeah, I didn't say no. I was really careful not to give any indication I didn't like it because I was really afraid.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's not quite fair. I'm not letting him know I don't like it. But also, he shouldn't have started fucking choking and hitting me really hard. It was like really, I was like trying. It was not good. Anyway, and then he would just push me way over time. Like I couldn't get out of it. And then I like left. I acted nice the entire way because another part of it, you don't want guys to know that you didn't like it. That way you can warn other women. Like you want him to use you as a reference. So other girls will come to you and then you can be like, actually, no. So I don't know. I acted nice the whole time. But he ended up using me as a reference, but faked. Like he used an email that looked like mine and like pretended it was mine. And then when a girl was like, oh, can you give me references? He gave me like the fake email that wasn't me that he controlled. And so luckily a girl went and checked because you're supposed to check the original website every time somebody gives you reference to make sure the email's matched. And luckily this is how I found out that he was doing this. Anyway, it's fucking shitty guy. If you're ever escorting, avoid him.
Yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, I guess I didn't think about it, but now that I'm thinking about it, there must be like you have to do a lot of screening.
Yeah, what
and
is
security?
The screening process?
Like, I mean, how can you tell like the details of it or
whatever? Other than getting references
what were the
from
obvious
other girls?
things?
What else?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who books an escort is going to know this. It's like there's two things you want to make sure if you're an escort is that the guy is not a cop and going to arrest you, and that he's not going to like hurt you, basically. And so you check for like proof of education or proof of employment. Proof of employment to some degree. So like you want like a photo of his badge with his face on it where it verifies that he works somewhere, and then you can call that place to verify that he works there. That sort of thing.
Like call his place of employment?
Yeah, some girls do that.
Pretending to be just something obviously not an escort.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, can I verify that, I'm just checking out a reference, like can I verify he's employed or something? Or you look him up online to verify that like sometimes he's listed. But usually the thing most people do is just you ask two other girls for reference. They have to research those girls that he gives and make sure that they're like real escorts. And there's like ways to kind of check that. But then usually they'll be like, yep, I saw him. He was fine. All good. Go for it. And that's great.
And you have an assistant who does this for you.
Yeah.
And is this common? Like escorts would have an assistant to handle the kind of
It's like not
paperwork.
Uncommon. It's maybe like 20%.
If you're very successful.
I mean, it depends on your range of income. If you're high enough, if you're charging enough rates, then yeah, assistants just make sense.
Can we ask how much you were charging?
Well, I started around 1,200 or I mostly charge around 1,200 an hour, and then after a while, raise it to 1,400.
And that's the highest. That's the highest it got. 1,400 was your
no. I mean, more recently, because like I kind of switched to doing it as a hobby as opposed to income, because I like having casual sex with people, and when they pay you, it like alleviates a lot of my anxiety around it. So I still kind of like for fun, and that's 3,000 an hour.
Okay. What anxiety do you have around that is alleviated by them paying you?
Like, am I making a dumb decision? So I am post-rationalizing what I think is going on. So this is a story. It might not be true. But there's this sense of like, if there's like a guy in my circles and I'm banging him, or I'm going to be like, oh, what will people think of me banging this guy? Because like, as a woman, your worth is determined by the quality of a guy you can get, kind of. Yeah. Like if you're banging like a homeless man on the street, it's kind of embarrassing. Even if I don't consciously
Some homeless guys are hot, though. Let's face it.
Yeah, they are.
Aren't they?
I have banged a few homeless guys. Yeah. But
all right, we're going to come back to that. Okay.
But but there's something about like being paid where it like alleviates that. Instead of me doing this thing of like, is this worth it? Like, am I making a good decision by doing this? Like, is this kind of just embarrassing for me? Like, does this guy feel like he's winning by like catching me? There's a lot of that. There's a lot of like guys who are going to feel like it's a status symbol to bang me. And I am like, is it rumor gonna get out and it's gonna be like, oh, that guy banged Aella? Like, LOL, Aella, she got clowned. And again, I'm not saying this is rational. This is like,
but if you're getting paid for it, it's work. No, I get it. I totally get it. It's like a work, but yeah, no, it's like a work thing. It's like I can justify, like going out to. I mean, this would be my version. Like I could justify going out to this movie or something because I'm going to write about it. Like, and I feel much better about myself. I feel less guilty for doing like quote unquote fun things if I can tell myself it's work related.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's plausible deniability.
No, that's true.
Would you accept your friends as clients, like people you knew well, and they're like, "Hey, let me just pay you"?
Done this before. At one point, somebody in my communities tried to hire me, and I had like kind of a freak out reaction. But I think I would probably be fine with it now. I think I've like gotten over it.
In your poly community, you mean?
Like the rationalist community.
Oh, you mean like the heterodox podcast space?
No, Aella is in the rationalist space, which is different kind of.
Oh, what's that? Okay.
How would you describe it? I've been like lurking in the rationalist world since I was like a teenager.
They're gonna ask to pay you for sex soon.
Yeah,
Sarah.
I'm not. No, so these are ASPIH people. I mean, that's how to describe them. They're like who they are, I guess. But the community is oriented around overcoming your own like mental biases in various ways. So they think about think about thinking, I guess, you know.
Yeah. Like, how do you improve thinking? Like, if you actually like, how do we actually think better? I think a lot of people sort of are doing things that kind of look like they're trying to think better, but it's not an explicit study devoted. How do you improve the quality of thought? So it's good.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a whole community oriented around it there. And they're in kind of, I mean, there's little groups of them all over. They actually do real life meetups as well, but the Bay Area has a lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, speaking of the Bay Area having a lot of things, homeless people. So you're saying that you have had sex with a couple homeless guys.
Was that a joke? That was a joke.
No, that was a segue. That was a segue. That was an A+ segue.
Okay.
Well, I think I've technically only had sex with one homeless person, and he was like a fine homeless person. He was like fashionably homeless.
Okay. So he was like homeless by choice.
But I have been friends with like a lot of normal homeless people. Like for a while, my primary friend group was the group of homeless people that lived outside my house, and that was great. But I didn't actually bang those people.
Okay. So, but like, what was the situation like? Like he approached you on the street, or did you go back to his? Did he live in a tent, or like what was his setup?
No, he's kind of like my sister. My sister is like kind of charismatic homeless right now. People really like her, and then she just stays on their couches. And then bounces around.
Okay, so this is not a raving homeless person in the street. Like, okay, all right.
It's like pseudo homeless.
I see. So homeless adjacent. It's kind of okay.
Homeless adjacent.
Yeah. All right. So so you have the screening process. You're making $1,400 an hour. So did they ever book you for like the weekend? Because I know there's a thing like where girls can be on a retainer. Like, is it like they take them on a vacation, or even like they have an exclusive arrangement with somebody? How does that work?
Yeah, I never caught a lot of that. I would occasionally get like overnights, but rarely weekends. Which is like maybe for I get very socially exhausted quickly, so I price those very high, which is probably why I think like $50K for a weekend or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, but occasionally it would be overnights.
So did they ever take you like a Pretty Woman thing where you would have to like socialize and, you know, go to a dinner? Did anybody ever like want you to just do something that doesn't involve sex at all? That just like go to a party with you or something, or have you on his arm?
Everyone talks about it, but I never actually went through with it. So one guy wanted to like bring me to impress all of his friends, but it never ended up. He got sick, so he couldn't do that. But yeah, I was a little surprised. I think I gave off like not hostile vibes, but like I'm not a warm, friendly mother vibe thing. like, I don't like talking to people. I have my assistant handle communication with them. The only time I talk to them is in person. And this kind of hurt my camming career as well. There's different like types of ways that people cam. And if you develop a relationship with the people that pay you, like you text them offline, you send them selfies, like sort of do this independent thing where I'm like, this is kind of like not strictly based on payment. I independently like you. Then you can see that's the way to really get your earnings skyrocket, because then you get them basically as like a mini sugar daddy in a sense. But that requires this sort of like natural like cultivation, warmth, a little bit of line blurring. And I'm terrible at this. I'm like, either I'm on or I'm off, and I'm not going to like engage with you if I'm not like on the clock. Which is just does not work for developing sugar daddies at all.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, just like the billing, I would think the invoicing, like keeping the hours straight in your head. I'm serious. Be very confusing. Like, can you use like QuickBooks or I don't know. Okay.
Like track their donations.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Sorry, Sarah, interrupt me. I have so many questions. But
no,
going.
There's too many. There's we could go on for a long time about, I think, the economics of sex work, but I guess I'm interested in what you think this effect, this like I guess OnlyFans, like, or this like sort of new wave of kind of personalized but not in person sex work, and what effect this has on our culture, our broader culture, or do you think it really doesn't? It's sort of something that happens on the periphery and doesn't have much to do with anything.
It's really hard to know. It's so hard. But like my guess is that it's like patching a wound that's been there for a long time. Like my guess is this is less the thing that's changing the culture and more like finally a way that like we are seeing like a visibility of a symptom that has already been there. It's more the way I tend to look at it. Like the demand for a personalized sex content, whatever connection, was clearly just like wait. It was just lying in wait. It was just sitting there waiting to be tapped into. Otherwise, we would have seen a much slower rise of OnlyFans. We would have seen like people very slowly convincing their friends to get on it or something, as like gradually culture drops in. But instead, we just saw meteoric rise. It existed, and people were just like, boom, we're in it now. And it became like fastly the most successful thing, which makes me think that this is not a thing that's like, I mean, there might be obviously ripple effects, right? Like, now it's like collectively known a woman can go to OnlyFans to make money in a way this was not aware of before. Yeah. And it's like changed the internet landscape. Like so many internet forums and social things have had radically changed their rules after OnlyFans came because people started using that. It's kind of a side topic, but OnlyFans is also interesting in that they were one of the first platforms to use their members as their marketers. Like, I don't know how much OnlyFans ads you've seen, but very few. But if you watch porn, there's a ton of ads for live cam sites like Live Jasmine or like My Free Cams or something. And with My Free Cams, you sign up. You don't do any advertising. All you do is make an account on the website. And the website hands you volume, traffic, consumers. They're bringing it in. They're paying those ads. And so it's like kind of stressful, but not. You just like put in front of an audience. Whereas OnlyFans just didn't do that. OnlyFans doesn't have a directory on it, or it does, but it's like so shitty. It's like made out of 20 people or something. So if you sign up to OnlyFans and you want subscribers, you have to go and you have to advertise your OnlyFans. I think this is partially why they grew so fast. But it also has the effect of like changing the landscape. If you like give everybody an incentive to advertise OnlyFans, then all the websites have to shift in order to handle that.
But how does this map onto these statistics about people just having less and less sex? I mean, we've heard about this. It's like, I mean, a third of men 18 to 24 reported having no sex in the last year. And that was even before the pandemic. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with this data. Like, people are not having actual sex, so they're doing things like looking at OnlyFans. Like, there has to be a new thing is in the air, it seems like.
I haven't done a research deep dive here, but I saw somebody saying that there's been like they checked this year's update, and it appears that sex rates are going back up quite a lot.
No.
We should probably double check. I'm just saying this from memory. I could be wrong, so don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
But I remember reading it and being like, oh, okay, like the sexless trend was like kind of a blip. Was the conclusion I drew from it. But I'm happy to update if I'm wrong. But yeah, I don't know. My guess is that it's like most likely OnlyFans is not the cause of this. Like OnlyFans got really popular during COVID, and you said the sexless trend started before COVID.
Yeah.
I guess this is probably due to like, isolation, like cultural isolation.
Yeah.
And also due to the fact we're not drinking as much. People are drinking way less alcohol.
And that is reducing. They're not going out and meeting. Well, they're not actually meeting people in person. You have to be in a physical space with somebody to have sex with them. So
yeah, these things are probably intercorrelated. Like you go out to a bar, you drink at the bar and stuff. But also I think that there's like a lot more, my suspicion is that a lot of early like young sex occurs mostly when drunk. Yes. Or some level of intoxicated. And this is kind of required. Like when I would have sex, all of my casual sex, I had to be drunk to do it. Otherwise it was just like, I can have sex sober now, but like it was so new and novel and intense. Like I had to be intoxicated in order to get myself to go through with it. And I didn't regret it. It was fine. Besides the health effects of alcohol. But we're also seeing this cultural shift where if you have sex with someone who's intoxicated, it's violating their consent. You're a rapist.
Yeah.
And
well, do you think the Me Too movement
this might be contributing?
Yeah. So, what do you think about the whole Me Too movement? Are men coming to escorts because it's just a more straightforward transaction than having to take the risk of like hitting on somebody in a bar or asking out a coworker?
I actually would be surprised if this were the case. My guess is that the Me Too movement had very little to do with like, I think men talk a game like, I can't hit on anybody. She's going to yell at me. But I think like in practice, this does not actually make them go to escorts. I would be surprised if it had a significant effect. I think like people do go to escorts when they want a sure thing, but usually people already know the kinds of dynamics they have with women and stuff.
Do you see female clients?
Only in conjunction with men.
Okay.
So like occasionally I have like a woman like hire me for her husband's birthday because she wants to gift him a threesome.
Oh, okay. Okay. And there's never been, even like lesbians like won't hire you?
I've never had lesbians reach out. Lesbians don't.
They don't really go to an escort.
They don't.
They would just like want to come over and like watch TV. That would be, just the, you have to reenact the like delicious lesbian bed death scene. I'm saying this as a positive thing. This is not an insult. So like how concerned are you, Aella, with like the quote unquote masculinity crisis? Do you worry about men? Like, do you think that they're really suffering as much as like people like us like to say, or are some of the Me Too types right that they should just man up without being men?
I think there's like an interesting, like almost paradox here. Like if you tell somebody that they should be suffering, they tend to suffer more. Like, you can see this with like the victim mentality of like, oh God, are you okay? Like this is not the microaggressions. And then you start becoming really sensitized to that. And there's a way where if you desensitize people that or treat it like no big deal, they actively experience less suffering. And there's a weird thing where I think in a way men are actually experiencing less suffering because society is telling them they shouldn't be experiencing suffering. Mm-hmm. Like they in fact are desensitized to it. Mm-hmm. But that is not also to say that men are in fact putting up with more shit because people are not sensitive. Like they're not like trying to care for men. So simultaneously, like men's like, for example, the small dick thing. It's okay to make fun of small dicks. And simultaneously, like I think men are actually probably doing better psychologically. Like one funny thing. So my kink survey, which has like probably 600,000 responses now, I asked people, what's your relationship attachment style? Like the secure avoidant thing. And men overwhelmingly pick secure and women mostly picked anxious. Like women's secure rating was like very low, but men were like, I'm fine, whatever. Men have way lower ratings of anxiety and mental health issues.
Right. Yeah.
But again, I agree that like society is like treating men like fucking shit. We don't care about them at all. So it's like confusing. I think we should get artificial wombs. I think this would fix a lot of it.
Really?
Oh yeah, this is right up Sarah's alley. You mean like the Shulamith Firestone idea?
The what?
Oh, Shulamith Firestone was a very both of you. I
know her.
I've had to Shulamith-splain. She was a whacked out radical feminist in like the 70s, and she had a whole idea that the only way women could be free was to like take gestation and lactation off the plate, so that there should be artificial wombs and like robots and I think she said giving birth was like shitting a pumpkin, I believe.
Yeah, so this was kind of the proto. She's a radical feminist, but like also a proto like almost a transhumanist.
She was mentally ill. I mean, I think
she was deeply mentally.
She died like, you know, she was like in her apartment eaten by her own dog kind of thing, I believe.
Whoa.
Yeah, there was some sad death.
Like that.
I don't know what it was.
It was no dog. She didn't have a dog.
No,
not that. But yeah.
No, it was something like that. Like she had died in it. But it seemed she's insane, but also brilliant. You know, when you read her work, it's like it's clear that this is a very bright person. This is also kind of very radical person, radical personality, and kind of crazy. But it's interesting that the way that she was thinking about our bodies and about our relationship to sex is kind of what's developed in the culture now. Anyway, I'm kind of disgusted by the idea of artificial wombs, because because I think there's ethical concerns that I have of what that means in terms of experimenting on children. Like, because in order to get the technology to work, you have to do a lot of unethical testing. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to mess up a lot, and I think that's not. I just have many ethical qualms, and that's just where they're beginning. Like from the experimental stage, I have ethical qualms, and then I think it continues down the road that there's a lot of problems with it. But you feel like we'll be free of something.
Yeah. Make the case, Aella.
Yeah, make the case.
Well, I think like AI is probably going to revolutionize everything, and either we're all going to be dead or it's going to be like a glorious transhumanist future. And in that case, we can probably do the ethical womb thing ethically, the artificial womb thing ethically. But the ethics of it like are kind of aside. Like maybe we shouldn't for other reasons, but I still think like if we did, this is sort of the thing required for like my galactic brain theory here is that like historically women were probably not actually oppressed, or if they were, that this was like a meaningful oppression because men were dying in wars. If you're a guy, you just like run off.
That's what I always say. Women die in childbirth and men died in wars. Right.
So in a way that like the gender sacrifice in like like when we had a lot more scarcity was a lot more even. Like, oh, I'm like okay to be, locked away at home taking care of children because at least I'm not out there, like on the front lines. And at least when the neighboring tribe raids me, I'm not the one that's going to be killed. I'm going to be used as a wife, to make more children. Like my husband's going to be killed. So like, I don't know. It's sort of like a value prop where you're sort of like, all right, we have balanced gender roles. Obviously not across the board, but to some degree. And then what did we do? We went and got rid of war.
Yeah.
We got rid of bears and raiding tribes and the things that men are good for. But we did not get rid of child rearing or childbirth. So like one of our sacrifices is gone and the other hasn't. And I think this is what caused feminism. Like we got to the point where we kind of collectively looked around and went like, wait a fucking second. Like women kind of have a shitty end of the deal right now. And then we went and forgot what men used to do, like why that even used to be the case. But that's besides the point. So anyway, my theory is like if we want us to balance it, you have to like we removed men's burden, now we have to remove women's if we want there to be like actual equality.
Is it a burden though? Like I mean isn't it the case that in so many ways, men have been robbed of a purpose, right? I mean, I'm not saying war is good. I'm saying men don't have a duty, like men don't have a role set out for them, and as a consequence, we can see, and I think it's clear that some may doubt that it is a related consequence. I think it is, that we see a lot of young men who are sort of floating around and they're unsure of themselves and they're unsure of what to do and they're not feeling engaged in the world because there's no clear place for them. Do you think that maybe that these sort of things that bring us down limit our choices, I guess, in one way or another, are also the kind of things that give us, a sense of identity and purpose?
Yeah, I think they can be. Like a lot of people like deliberately choose more restrictive lives because of this. Like the Amish go out and they have their thing where they explore the world, and then a lot of them decide to come back and spend their life there.
Yeah.
Like I think this is clearly good. But also my suspicion is that a lot of the lack of purposelessness about men, there's like downstream ripple effects from the fact that women have the burden. Like in having the burden, there's like a lot more power that women have, like the victimhood thing. And it's like, who are men if they cannot provide for women? Like what role is men if women don't need them? Right. Like men need women don't need men, sort of asymmetry. And so I'm like, my guess is if you balance it, at least we would see some sort of thing there. I'm not saying we wouldn't have other problems.
What if we saw balanced misery? You know, like what if we saw like the kind of purposelessness that men feel because women took their role is then something that more women feel because now AI has taken their role.
Or they can't, if their purpose is to have children, if they can't find men to have children with, then they can't have children. So they also feel purposeless. I mean, this is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
I'm not sure with them. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, so like if women's purpose is to have, if you get a sense of purpose and meaning from that, and that's something that women can now do without men. It used to be that you couldn't do that.
Well, with the womb, artificial womb thing, I don't think it. I think you still
it's
need
not necessarily
a sperm,
the womb
like,
thing. Yeah, okay, but like
you
don't
would still
have to
need sperm, I guess. And then the womb itself, like is happening somewhere else. So it's your body. I guess it depends
on how hypothetical our terms are.
You can still do it without a man. You know, like as a woman. Do you mean just that you can be a single mom more?
Yeah, I'm not talking
it's
about,
more available to you because you're not harming your own body. I guess,
like women don't need men anymore. Like when women were given economic agency and allowed to have jobs and have credit cards and own their homes, they weren't reliant on men anymore. And so they don't even need a man to have a child. I mean, obviously, like physically, literally they do, but they don't, there's no, men don't have a purpose. They're not needed the way they used to be. And that would, of course, cause a huge crisis.
Right. So wouldn't an artificial womb do that for women? Like men can now have children without a woman, without a
but that's not what gives them purpose. I don't think it's analogous necessarily. Sorry, Aella, sorry. What do you think?
What do you mean what doesn't give women purpose? Like,
no, I don't think I don't think that like if a man was able to commission an artificial womb in order to have children, I don't think they would, because I don't think that's what gives them like a sense of, being necessary. Like I think going to war, even though they don't want to do that and nobody really wants to do that, I think going to war gives them a feeling of, purpose and duty as a man.
I think it's just the fact that I think a man wants to feel like a provider, and it's less of like, I want to combat, because it's not as if we were doing that. It's not as if all of our ancestors were in combat all the time. Like many of them were just being, beasts of burden, honestly, in one way or another. But I think you need to feel needed. I think that's what the need is. The need is to feel needed. But the more, there's something about this glorious transhumanist future that to me seems like it could also be like a hellscape, to the extent that we just free ourselves up from all these, burdens. And it's easy to see how they're burdens, but I think it's harder to see how they also help us feel significant in a way that's like, spiritually important.
Yeah, we're disconnecting ourselves from nature. We're disconnecting ourselves from our natural existence. And that's like...
Our natural existence historically has not been great. Like most of human history is filled with atrocity. Yeah. And to some extent, like I could see the argument like, oh, if we remove this, this thing that gives us meaning historically, like it's going to be bad. We could apply that to a lot of things historically that people then did remove. But we decided that it was good in hindsight. It kind of reminds me a little bit, but I think it's also kind of true, though. Like a lot of people say that we shouldn't cure death because, dying gives your life meaning. Like, that it's limited. And I think that like this is true, but also not a good argument. Like it is true that probably there's some kind of meaning that's going to be lost by living forever, but it feels more important to have greater optionality. Like there's a lot of meaning that was present in my like really regressive or restrictive upbringing. That is now no longer present because you require the restriction to do that. And I would like people to be able to choose that restricted life, but I do not want people to have that as their only option. That seems really bad. And so like I'm down, like there are some like downstream effects that aren't great from like having more freedom. Like it's harder to develop a core community, for example, or like I had to personally reconstruct the way that I made like existential meaning out of scratch. And that was really hard and painful for a long time. And for a while I didn't have a lot of meaning. But ultimately, it was worth it because, like, I was able to find other ways of doing this. And I'm not saying that, like, this on a society scale is not going to have drawbacks, but rather that, like, probably long term, we're going to figure out how to adjust for those drawbacks and also that it's worth it.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the other factor that it is important to maybe consider is that, I feel I don't need such things to feel like meaning. I think if I wasn't a mother, I still had a meaningful life before. And I would have been robbed of something important, like something that, I value quite a bit, but I wouldn't spiral into depression. Like, I'm not one of those women, but I think that for many people, that's not the case. Like there are things that are true for a small minority of us. And I think the three of us here, and this is part and parcel of like what's weird about like being a public figure, because by the time you get to this point, like by the time you get to a point where you're the kind of person people want to listen to you, and you have a camera in front of your face and you're talking and you're giving out all your hot takes and people are actually listening, you're already kind of you're kind of a special person. You're a little bit of a freak. Yeah, you are an outlier. You're not
representative of the norm. Yeah.
Right. And so there's something about this where, I mean, who knows, right? And it's hard to not talk down to humanity and say, no, I don't need this, but other people, the sheep, they need restrictions to feel. Huh?
Like, I think we can change, like, if we're at the point where we have the tech to have artificial wombs and, like, full post-scarcity or automated child rearing in a way that's healthy, if we have the tech to do that, we also have the tech most likely to change our own brains. You feel depressed, we're probably going to have, like, a way better, understanding of what makes that. We're going to know what actually we have to do in order to create meaning in people's lives. Like, my guess is, like, as this pain point increases and our tech increases, we're going to be able to resolve this somehow. Genetic engineering. We just no longer have children that experience depression, stuff like this.
Yeah.
What would the artificial womb thing look like to you? Like, do you envision a scenario? Like, would you be interested in having a child that was gestated in an artificial womb?
Yeah, that would be really cool. I would like to have the hormones, though. The pregnancy hormones, those seem beneficial.
Oh. But
if I could just, like, I don't know, somehow inject those to make it happen. But yeah, I don't have, like, a good sense of artificial womb technology. I assume it's, like, a really long way
And
off.
what would automated child rearing look like? So, like, there wouldn't even be parents of these children?
Well, let me just imagine, like, the infinite babysitter. Like, you're just exhausted and you need to take a nap, and it's just, like, there's an infinite babysitter. Like, they're down to, feed your child and, like, soothe it. That seems pretty cool. And with AI, assuming it doesn't all kill us, like, it seems likely that we'll be able to just make that.
How far out are we from that? Because you're quite young, so maybe you can look forward
10, 20
to that.
years?
20 years. Okay. Wow.
10 or 20 years.
Yeah. Well, so we know you have to go in a few minutes, but I wanted to ask you about something that came up in your conversation with Lex Friedman the other day, or whenever that was recently. You said that most men ultimately want vanilla sex. I think you used the word vanilla. And I thought that was really interesting because it seems to contradict so much of what we see in the culture, which is so obsessed with kink, and the sex positivity has really embraced this like idea that, you shouldn't be boring, you shouldn't be vanilla. All the dating apps have ad campaigns now that emphasize like you're polycool or you're like, you're furry. I like Tinder literally had some kind of Subway ad campaign that like it was furries, like meet your perfect furry match. So like, how do you kind of square those two threads? Like, I think you're probably right that at the end of the day, people just want to have like a normal, like intimate kind of encounter. But at the same time, the culture is just like telling us to just like turn up the volume constantly.
No, the advertising isn't what people want. It's what people want to see themselves as.
Yes.
And not that you are a furry, but that you are the kind of person who's accepting of furries. Like, this is why, like, LGBT stuff is, like, really overinflated in advertising. Like, if you look at ads for, like, OkCupid, like, 50% of their ads show LGBTQ. And it's not, like, does not mean that most people are that. It just means that, I'm aligning myself with like the kind of person I want to be, the kind of person that is like okay being on a dating site where there's a lot of gay people. That's all it means. And I think that's all that the kink thing means, and the poly and it's like, I want to be the thing that's like a cool sex accepting person, even if you personally are not that kinky. I really do not see it as like any sort of deep indication. Sexuality is extremely hard to change, hence why all those gay conversion camps don't work. Like,
But do you think that young kids are getting the message that they need to have like kinky, weird sex in order to not be a basic? Like, I mean, why is choking got introduced because it was in porn, and now like your average 16-year-old thinks that that's what they're supposed to like?
Well, they may actually be supposed to like that. It depends on. Did you see my recent survey on how porn influences? I asked how much do you watch porn, and then I asked men to predict what they think women would like in bed, and then I asked women what would you actually like in bed, with like the exact same wording, exact same scenario, just like the gender and perspective change, and found that men who watch porn actually more accurately predicted what women liked in bed. But again, it depends on what you mean. But like one of the biggest caps was choking, actually, light choking. Women were much more likely to say that they wanted this to happen in bed, and like men just drastically underestimated this. But they were slightly more accurate if they watched more porn. Women are generally way kinkier than men when it comes to like dominance and submission stuff. Women like much more want to be fucked up in bed than men want to fuck them up. So we're like, was porn teaching people?
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'm like, and there's another thing where it's like I think sexual kinks are basically function the same way as sexual orientations. So if you're asking a question about a kink, you should ask it about like, if kids are being shown like being gay is normalized, is that going to make them more gay? And if you think that it might, then yes, I would be concerned about kinks. But like my intuition here is that it probably isn't. Like either you're straight or gay. And like maybe this will impact like, maybe you'll be more likely to present gay or like be more likely to be friends with people who are gay or something. I don't know. But like it's very hard to change basic personality, like basic sex traits.
I think this is where I disagree with you. And I don't know if we've talked about, I think we've talked about this before when you first brought it up, because I think that, I mean, porn obviously has like, it has had an effect on our culture in terms of what people even consider to be like rough sex, you know, like if you polled people 30 years ago, 40 years ago, what they thought rough sex was, and what they think it's now, like, I mean, clearly that has changed a little bit. And I'm not saying that this means that women don't generally, you know, like submission fantasies or something. It's just that the degree to which you need, you know, like we're just heightening up, turning up the volume basically on all ends, because you need to be able to get off the next time. Like it's the other constant that's true of sexuality is that we get bored with whatever we see if we see it too often, and we need some kind of novelty. And sometimes that novelty is just like leaning in a little bit more into whatever you're already into. So you go from somebody who enjoys light spanking to somebody who like needs a dungeon. You know, I mean, I'm not, I don't think that this happens to the average person all the time, but you know, even just like if you go to a porn site now, it's like, I remember the first time I accidentally, when I was a kid, I went on a porn site. Some boy was like, hey, Sarah, look this up. Like, go to this website, go to this address. And it was just some random web, like, I don't even know. It was like a normal looking address. And I went to it. And it was a porn site. I was like, oh, it was very, very scary as like a young girl to see all of that. But I remember what I saw. And it was very, very, it was what would be considered now to be super, super, like, not even porn, you know, not even like, it's like sensuality, really. Like, it's something that anyone would be doing almost. So I don't know. But I guess, so we have like, do we have time for like one more question maybe?
Yeah.
Or we
question.
can.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Well, I think what I think really fascinates me about, you know, the way that you talk about things that you're very good at decoupling. And I noticed that throughout, you know, your Twitter persona when you're tweeting. And a lot of people get mad because of this kind of sensitive topics that you talk, you know, and the kind of moral questions that you probe into and make people uncomfortable a little bit. How much is, how does this relate to, you know, your work? Do you think that if you didn't have this kind of personality, you would have a harder time in sex work? Do you think you would be in it at all? Or does this have like no effect?
My guess is it's slightly correlated, but not strongly. Mm-hmm. Like, I think what's more important to my sex work is some sort of like unusual relationship to disgust. Like, I don't know if this actually was formative, but I remember very distinctly being quite young and being like disgusted at something like, oh, it's dirty or whatever. I shouldn't put that in my mouth. And then I was like, wait a second. If I actually put it in my mouth, like, what is going to happen? And I'm like, it's just nothing. Like, nothing's going to happen. Like, do I think I'm going to get sick? I was like, no. And I was like, oh, wait. So my disgust response is not related to actual things that happen. And I remember that being like a really big revelation for me. And I remember like being committed that like, okay, I'm going to just ignore my disgust response. Like, this is useless. And I don't know if that was it, but like it was very clear, that memory, and that feels like it's just in everything for me. And I think that is related to my sex work, because like a lot of the time, sometimes I'll be like, ooh, I feel kind of weird about this, and then I'll check. I'm like, is there anything actually? Sometimes there is, to be clear. Like I'm not saying that like just like I ignore all red flags internally, but a lot of the time I'm like, well, this is a lot of what happened when I was first fucking people in my early 20s. I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't bang them, but why? I couldn't think of a good reason. I was like, okay, I was just really good at ignoring that. And I think that underlies a lot of the decoupling stuff, because like a lot of people do coupling because of disgust responses. And there's obviously different types of disgust responses. There's like, there's a really cool surveys actually that measure different categories of disgust response. And I'm very high on body horror disgust response. Anything that like, if you like break skin, wounds, bleeding, that I'm like top horrifying, but all the other ones I'm really low on. Anyway, but I think that is the biggest thing.
Interesting. No, that sounds like intuitively makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I do think that there's something about like women who just have a hard time, not falling in love with the people that or catching feelings for the people that they sleep with. And if you're able to sort of, I guess, detangle that really well, then I think that then sex work would be an easier transition, or just like a more pleasurable, really.
Yeah. And I wonder too if there's a connection between that and kind of like the critical thinking, free think space, like to separate your emotional response from facts.
Yeah.
Like, because you said earlier, it's very hard to offend you. And I'm, I know we have to stop, but Sarah and I talk a lot about temperament. Like, do we just have a particular kind of temperament that we don't get offended by things? We don't take things personally in the way that a lot of other women do. And is that some kind of like little form of autism, or like, what is it? But I think it's something that a lot of people share who are like wanting to ask these questions in this particular way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
That's a good insight.
Well, this was really fun. Thank you for doing this. And,
thank you guys. I'm glad I finally got to like directly talk to you guys.
Yeah. It's this has been very educational.
I'm glad we passed your screener. Your assistant screened us and checked our references.
Check my
other people who've been on the podcast. If we choked them and beat them up. So
I would watch that. We should.
I know.
That was special.
Okay.
We've had guests that tried to beat us up.
Yeah, we've had some rough times.
With some rough pods.
Rough times. But we consented to it ultimately, right?
We did. We
got on and we never said no. So
big time. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, all right. Thank you so much.
All right.
Take care.
You.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.